Hello everyone, we're back again today. We're enjoying a little bit of spring break, so we got a little bit more time idle to ourselves to do some cooking and actually record it and that kind of stuff. So another video coming at you where today we're going to do some roasted broccoli, sauteed onions and mushrooms. Gonna pan, sear, and cook some couple of ribeye steaks and make some macaroni and cheese. So the macaroni and cheese is Velveeta box brand shells and cheese. Would have actually made it from scratch, but this is what my wife wanted, so that's what we're going with today. So let's get to it. Alright, first things first, I went ahead and preheated the oven to 425, got it going, got a pot of water started on the stove, and I started preheating my big fryer pan all at the same time. While that's all kind of coming up to temp, I've got a big bowl of this broccoli florets here. So there's not really a lot of prep I'm going to do. I'm going to put them all in the sheet tray, but first I'm going to take a little olive oil, toss it a little bit. No, it's kind of important to be careful not to put too much oil because these florets will absorb it like a sponge, and so you don't want it to be soggy mess when it's all said and done. And then I'm going to try to mostly get the stem sides down where possible here, and then lightly season with some salt. Fresh pepper. And when this is done preheating the oven, I'll just put this in 15-20 minutes, check it, maybe flip some stuff, let it go a little bit more if needed. So I'm going to set this to the side. Alright, next thing, so I'll go ahead and bring these two ribeyes over. I want to keep a lot of this fat cap on there because I want to sear that. It's got a lot of fat here in the middle. It's okay. It is important that I get a pretty generous coating of salt on the outside. I'll start by sprinkling it over the top, but I won't care too much if I get some on the board because I'll come back to the board and roll the edges on that. I did let these steaks come to room temperature. They've been sitting out for a couple hours on the counter. That'll help with the cooking process. Kind of roll some of the edges on the board. Try to get some seasoning on all the edges. Alright, I'm going to set this to the side. Alright, I already cut up a pretty big container of white and yellow onions, a little bit of the whites of a couple of green onions. I did this earlier this week, and this is just kind of left over from that. I opened up a container of sliced white button mushrooms and like a mix, so there's some portobello. I see a couple of other different mushroom types in here. That was just in a mix, so I'm going to have these. Those came pre-sliced, so they're kind of already set up and ready. So now the only really last prep thing I want to do, I'm going to grab my box grater, and I want to shred up some of this, some of these other cheeses that I got. To go into the mac and cheese. So even though it is the box brand, I'd like to add some cheese with some actual flavor. So I've got some pretty stout. Now this isn't funky cheese by any means, but they're very aggressively flavored cheeses. So I've got like a really aged Gouda. And this is that aged Gouda. I had a little of this the other day. It's quite good. Let's get the rind. Go ahead and cut some of the rind off on this. I usually like to save the rinds. Sometimes they can go into something that you just put in some Parmesan, some other rinds. Keep a little baggie in the fridge. And then if I need them, there's certain soups and stews and stuff that it's good to put like a parm rind or something else. All in all, for 2 big boxes, that's probably 2 cups. I could probably compress it down, 1.5 cups, something like that, of cheese to go with those. All right, we have the water nearly boiling pretty heavily over here on the side. You can see all kinds of bubbles just on the edge of the screen, right in here. Got pan up on medium-high heat. Put in a good bit of olive oil. Toss in our onions. These cook and let off a little bit of water before I add the mushrooms, because if I have a bunch of water in here, the mushrooms will absorb it, and I actually would prefer some of that to steam off. That way the mushrooms get a little browning on them as opposed to just cooking by absorbing some hot liquid. It'll help bring out their flavor a lot more. Alright, well that's going. Water's up to a boil, so I'm going to go ahead, pour in the pasta into that pan. Give that a little bit of stir just to prevent some sticking. Put the lid on it. And let that cook. Alright. Got the pot on the noodles. They're cooking. They take about 10 minutes or so. 8 to 10 minutes. This has started to get a little bit of color on them. They've started to give up some of the liquid. Most of the liquid you see in the pan is actually oil. That's good. I think we're at the point now. Add in the mushrooms. I've still got the heat medium-high to high heat. Since this is a very wide pan, I've got it closer to high than anything. So we make sure we keep that hot surface. And remember, I want these to kind of brown more so than I want them to just cook and release the liquid that way. I'll put another little sprinkle of salt, a little more black pepper. Also going to put in about 1.5 teaspoons, 2 teaspoons of garlic powder. Make sure this keeps moving a little. Even though I do want it to brown, I also don't want it to stick. With this high heat, that can happen pretty easily. I'm just still continuing to let these cook down. You can see some of the onions starting to gelatinize a little. That's great. Some of the mushrooms are giving off some of their liquid. Alright, we've let this cook. This is in a pretty good spot right now. A lot of the pan is kind of dry at the moment. Everything's kind of cooked out. That's pretty good. So at this juncture, I'll take a little cornstarch. Sprinkle into the pan here. Mix this together fairly well. Then I've got some beef stock and a little Worcestershire sauce. Just a little Worcestershire. Some beef stock. Not a lot. Cornstarch doesn't have the same level of thickening power as like a roux might have. But it'll thicken a little bit. That looks about perfect, and that'll seize up a little bit further, and maybe I'll add a little bit more liquid as I need to. But while that's going, I turn the heat off on the noodles. They're ready. I'm going to drain them, not rinse, just drain. Kind of see both things at once here. I'll turn this up a bit. I'm going to take about a third of a stick of butter and put that in there. Melt down a little bit. I'm going to turn the heat back in this noodle pan back on low. Put in the cheese sauce from its pouch. Okay, the other one. This is 2 of those boxes, so I should get all of this in here. And a little bit of stick in here, so I gotta be careful. Now I'm going to turn the heat off of this for now. The butter's all melted in here. Cheese sauce is coating. Grab about half of this shredded cheese. Mix in. See what that looks like. Probably good to put a little bit more butter in here. I don't want this to be one big sticky mess. Just a little sticky mess. Gonna add just a little bit of milk, help thin this out. There we go. Now I'm gonna add the last of the cheese. mix it in well. There's enough residual heat in the pan that anything not melted at this point is just going to melt with the residual heat. So I'm going to make sure all the heat's turned off on this. Alright, I scooped out all the onion mushroom mixture. I got the mac and cheese off the stove. I put that in put the mushrooms and onions in a bowl. Went ahead and rinsed this out just a little bit. Dried it off with a paper towel. Put it back on high heat. We're going to cook the steaks next, so this needs to be hot as I can get this pan to be. And then the timer went off in the meantime for the broccoli. So I'm going to pull it out. Perfect. You want to see a little bit of char, but you don't want it to be burnt or nothing's sticking. This is perfect. So I'm going to turn the oven off. Alright, it took a little time to clean up while I was waiting on this to come to heat. You can see a tiny bit of smoke coming off the pan. That's a good indication that it's about as hot as we want it. I'm going to take some high temp vegetable oil. Put this down. And then I'm going to start by putting that fat cap straight onto the pan. This is going to smoke and sizzle, so be careful with that. I don't have the Vena hood on because it's right next to the camera for right now, but we may have to cut that here in a little bit. Now to make sure that I let it sit still for as long as possible. You want to build the crust at Maillard reaction. Look at that crust, beautiful. Alright, I'm going to turn the heat down. Medium low, melt this butter. It's the other 2/3 of a stick that I didn't use. Ooh, be careful, splash. Alright, at this point, it's important to turn it pretty frequently until it's done. You could, again, butter baste this, but call that the chef's piece. Oh, we're getting close now. We're looking for close to 130. Oh yeah. I'm going to pull this slightly thinner one off, put it on my cutting board, and it will come the rest of the way up to temp just by sitting there. This one's still got a bit to go. It was a little bit thicker, so not surprising. All right, pull that second one off. Turn the heat off on this. Let that garlic continue to cook a little bit. That stuff's good. That's little fried garlic bits. And this garlic butter. As long as you don't, part of the reason why we take the temp down to medium, and it takes a little longer to cook the steaks this way, but you don't burn the garlic, you don't burn the oil, the butter, and then you can actually use some of this for something. Now comes the hard part. We've had our meat cooking. Now we have to let it rest. It smells wonderful, but it needs to rest. So I'm going to cover it on this board with a little aluminum foil. It'll help bring that internal temperatures where it needs to be. And then we're going to let it rest 5 to 10 minutes. And then come back. It's not quite medium rare, it's medium, but that's still pretty good. All right, get this out of the way. And there's one hell of a plate.